Hey there. I'm just going to wait a moment and just see if there's anybody who wants to log in and check this video out. So the reason I'm coming on here today is because today in Guernsey the borders are opening up for people who are vaccinated, and I wanted to give you a little bit of reassurance for those who might be feeling a bit fearful that we're going to be racked with this COVID virus. So what I want to do is talk to you from a holistic perspective. We're taught the medical theory of disease, which is based on the germ theory. This is Pasteur's germ theory, which is this idea that you catch disease. And he actually refuted it on his deathbed and said that we need to listen to Béchamp. And Béchamp was another scientist, French scientist, both of them, who worked in the same era as Pasteur. But because Pasteur discovered the fermentation industry for beer, the French government loved him. So you will find that with science, it's sort of how popular it is kind of biased and influenced by the politics of the time. So you tend to be popular as a scientist if you're going along with the politics of the time. So Pasteur made a lot of money for the French government in that time, and they liked his approach. The problem with the germ theory is it doesn't really work out, because if the germ theory really was a reality, then we would be catching things all the time. And, say you're working in an office and someone's got a cold, why is it that only 2 out of the 10 people, say in the office, I'm just giving you an example here, but just imagine, why is it only 1 or 2 get the cold and the rest don't? If the germ theory is true, all of them would get the cold. So this is what I want to put to you here, is that the traditional germ theory idea doesn't really make sense. What we follow as holistic therapists, and certainly I do in my philosophy, is the terrain theory, which was pushed forward by Béchamp. And the terrain theory simply means that the environment in your body has to be conducive to growing any kind of virus or bacteria. So viruses always grow inside the cell, and bacterial growth always occurs outside the cell. And then you've got funguses and you've got parasites, you've got all sorts of other things. And the reason I'm talking to you about this is because I want you to take your power back here and know that actually we have a lot more control over our health than we think we do. It's never a case of just catching something. It's always about many different factors. And the 5 areas I always look at are your family history, your diet, your lifestyle, your environment, and your emotional trauma. And another word for emotional trauma is simply stress, because any stress we feel is on the basis of our past experience. I know that when we get stressed, say someone cuts us up in traffic, we might blame that person entirely for the stress we're experiencing. But the research shows that only 10% of our stress comes from that trigger. And actually 90% of the stress is the past experiences we've had that are unresolved, that sit a little bit like a ticking time bomb. So that's a whole other area, but it is part of those 5 areas. And the invitation I have for you today, if you're feeling at all fearful that the borders are opening up, that there's a possibility that you will be exposed to this awful COVID virus, you're going to catch it and you're going to suffer, and that the cases are all going to go up in Guernsey and it's all going to be awful. There is a possibility that the cases will go up, that with the borders opening this will happen. But like I say, I want you to take your power back and know that when you take care of yourself, it is possible to reduce or even avoid the occurrence of viral activity. Now, viral activity is spontaneous, but it has to have exactly the right environments to grow inside your cell. That is the correct amount of oxygen, which is very low levels of oxygen, very low levels of light, very low pH, and a very low core body temperature. So there have to be exact conditions to grow it. And depending on those 5 areas that I'm talking about will determine how susceptible you are to experiencing viral activity. And that is why it's different for everybody. Some symptoms are similar, but some people will have a terrible bout of COVID. Some people will have no symptoms at all. You know, it just varies. It depends. It's not about catching something and then it wreaking havoc in your body. It's about the environment that it's being exposed to in your body and how you then react to that. So what can you do about this? Well, first of all, there are many simple things you can do. First of all, you might want to consider actually coming and seeing a holistic practitioner like myself, where we will go through your entire history. I know it sounds laborious, but it really isn't. And we look from your family history, so we look at your ancestry, what the diseases are that your ancestors died of, where they came from, because certain parts, particularly of the UK, suffered with much more tendencies towards certain diseases than others, and to a more chronic toxic load, as we call it. So we've got the west coast of Scotland that has a very high incidence of celiac disease and schizophrenia, and we also have the west coast of Ireland. So it's very interesting where you come from and what the diseases are that have been handed down. So what is the load on your system? How big are the predispositions that you have been handed down? And you have control over not what's handed down to you, but how you then deal with that. You know, knowledge is power. If you know that you've been handed down a heavy toxic load because there's been a lot of early deaths in your family, a lot of cancer, heart disease, strokes, you don't need to worry about that, but you need to get aware of it and then discover what you can do about it, which is so much. There is so much you can do. So that's your family history. Then we can look at your diet, we can look at your lifestyle, we can look at the stress you experienced as a child growing up and to the present day, what kind of triggers stress you out, make you unhappy, what areas of your life aren't working for you, work, etc., etc. So that's what you do when you work with a holistic practitioner, is you get to the grassroots of your whole history. You don't get a 10-minute consultation where your doctor just deals with your symptoms there and then. And this is what will be so amazing about integrated medicine when it finally happens, which is where under one roof you can get your scans and your diagnosis from your doctor, and then you can get passed on to your holistic practitioner to help you change your diet, your lifestyle, deal with your limiting beliefs, your stress, or whatever it is. Now, at the moment, you've got to go off on your own back and go and find that help, haven't you? You know, you can get diagnoses, you can get blood tests, you can get scans with your doctor. But for example, if your doctor says to you, you've got high cholesterol, they might give you some statins to take or something like that. That's not going to help you long term, is it? Because there's a reason why that cholesterol's built up around your cell walls. You know, the body doesn't produce disease for fun. It doesn't produce symptoms for fun. It produces... Hello everybody. Sorry, I don't know what happened to the internet connection. I don't know if you heard me say bugger or anything, but I'm like, why is that happening? So that kind of stopped me. So I was talking about cholesterol being built up around the cell walls, just to give you an example that disease isn't random. If you contract COVID, if you develop symptoms of COVID, it is because there are the conditions for it to grow. And the viral activity is actually going to get your body to sort of clear it out. So it's actually a really positive... Well, it's not a positive thing. It's a horrible thing to experience. But viral activity is okay if it clears your system and your body is able to clear it, and then off you go. So going back to the cholesterol, the reason the body produces cholesterol is to protect the fluid inside the cell. Why would it be doing that? It's doing that because you're chronically dehydrated, and it is a protective way to stop you from becoming more dehydrated. The problem is If that isn't rectified, if you don't change that and hydrate fully, adjust your diet, adjust your lifestyle, reduce your stress, it's going to continue. And as the cholesterol builds up around the cell wall and the damaged fats harden around the cell wall, you're not going to get that lovely movement of nutrients in and rubbish out. And, you know, this is not good, is it? So we've got to change that. We've got to become empowered about how we can help our bodies and how we can help ourselves. It's, you know, it's a bit like what you've probably heard with COVID, that most people, I think it's a huge percentage of people, most have got low vitamin D levels when they suffer with COVID. It's because the environment within the body is conducive to viral activity, because the body is out of kilter. So it's really to invite you to take the opportunity either to come and have a session and let's get underneath your picture and explore it from family history right to the present day and unearth anything that isn't serving you. Also know, because my brother said the other day, oh, but you know, maybe sometimes people don't want to come to see you because, you know, you're going to tell them to stop eating this, that and the other. The body is so forgiving. You do not need to live on a strict, perfect, healthy diet 100% of the time. 80% of the time probably is a good idea. But the body is hugely forgiving. You don't have to give up all your favourite foods the whole time and your favourite glass of wine. It's just that most of the time you want to take care of yourself. And if you are sabotaging your health with poor habits, you know, and that's not just diet, that might be overgiving, being, you know, extending your energy too much. All sorts of different sabotaging techniques we have, not just food and drink. But then we want to look at that and say, well, why is that happening? Why are we relying on that alcohol? Why are we relying on that chocolate every single day to get through the day? There's going to be a good reason for it. You know, there's a positive reason why we choose these things. They help us feel better within a very there's my son trying to get hold of me. He'll have to wait because this is important. So it was really just to go through that with you and encourage you and remind you that it is possible to look after your health even if you have COVID or don't even get it, but you want to be healthy, that there are different strategies that you can use. It is not a question of trying to avoid getting it, but it is a question of allowing the borders to open so that we can have a little bit of normality in our lives, but also recognize that we have a part to play in our health. It's not a question of just catching something. It is about having the environment to grow it. And if your environment is conducive to that growth, change needs to happen. So how do we have better oxygen levels, better levels of light, a better pH and a better temperature within the body? Those are the conditions we need to be better for a healthy body. That is where we've got to hydrate fully. We've got to use our fruit and vegetables more. We've got to cut down on the sugar and the salt and the alcohol. I'm sure you know all of this. You know, whoever's listening to this, I'm sure there's more you can discover about nutrition. But it was really just to jump on here and reduce the fear. You know, reduce the fear, feel back in control, know that even, you know, as the borders open, we have to learn how to live with COVID. We need to reduce our fear and trust that if we are doing the right things to take care of ourselves, if we're getting enough sleep, if we're drinking enough water, if we are managing our stress, if we're dealing with our stress, if we're talking to somebody about our stress or doing something about it, that we are doing everything we can to take care of ourselves. There is no reason why you should suffer. And even if you do suffer, it should be short-lived, fingers crossed. So I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else that is useful. So really how you're going to respond to COVID or any disease you present will be down to how heavy your toxic load is. And your toxic load is based on those 5 areas that I've already described. So it's remembering that, it's always bringing it down. It's getting away from this idea that we're being attacked by something outside of ourselves. Things are around us all the time. Bacteria and viruses are around us all the time. We have a fully functioning virome and microbiome within our system that does not disrupt our functioning. In fact, when it's in balance, we are perfectly fine. So we need to get away from this idea that, and live in fear that we could suffer in this way. We are in control. We're much more in control than you can ever imagine. And the wonderful old tried and tested holistic systems, the traditional Chinese medicine, has these wonderful roadmaps to describe and explain to you how the body works. For example, in traditional Chinese medicine, we have a hierarchy of disease. We have a hierarchy of organs, I apologize, which means that from the lowest toxic load to the deepest toxic load, it goes from bowel first, so we will manifest problems in bowel and skin first. We'll move up to liver, up to lungs and kidneys, and then up to heart, brain and mind. So by the time you are starting to have mental distress like depression, you have had already imbalance via the bowel, the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, and up to the heart, brain and mind. You see, the body is a very ordered vehicle. So it's really trusting that the body knows what it's doing. It knows how to heal itself. We need to get out of its way and we need to give it what it needs. And if you want to understand more about this, come and see me. Even if you just book in one session and we go through your history, it's typically quite difficult to go through your history in one session, but it's possible. But even just to give you an overview of where you're going right and where you might be slightly going wrong, and maybe you just need to make a few tweaks. But like I said, I just jumped on here because I wanted to reassure everybody that we need to stop being scared and we need to trust that our body knows how to heal, and that yes, there are some awful, COVID-related terrible complications and even deaths. There are COVID vaccine-related injuries and deaths. It's only a tiny percentage that are suffering with COVID in terms of the, serious complications. And it's the same with the vaccine injury. And that is down to the individual. It's not carte blanche across it's the individual. So the more that you understand your history, and you understand the way you function and your symptoms and what they mean, the more empowered you are to do the right things, make sure your vitamin D levels are correct, make sure you're getting enough rest, etc. With vitamin D, it's not just about taking vitamin D. You could be taking vitamin D and your liver isn't able to convert it to the active vitamin D that you need. It's more than just sometimes taking things. So let's get wise and, let's get really underneath what's going on with our health and stop looking outside of ourselves and being fearful of what's going on outside, but focus our attention inwards into taking care of ourselves and making those changes without the negative judgment and criticism that we tend to give ourselves that we're not eating the right diet. It does not have to be the perfect diet. It might need to be a really good diet in the beginning if you really are out of kilter, but it does not have to be a perfect diet. You do not need to eat immaculately for the rest of your life or every minute of every day. You can have your favourite foods, you can have your favourite drinks and things. It's just you're putting it into a structure where most of the time you're doing the right thing for your body, and your body will reward you. Any questions, please fire them off to me by getting in touch, and if you want to talk through possibly having a session and getting an overview of what's going on with your health and where you need to direct your attention, please do get in touch. I've worked in this one area for the whole of my life. I was brought up in the area of health with my father, but also it's been, as an adult, the only thing I've ever done, and have invested all my time and energy